week 2 is in the books. How does everybody feel?
You know what? So after having heard that Austin was going to make some changes, I was like, yeah, there's probably goes my second place. Since I stayed the same, I can't exactly complain about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're approaching double digits, which,
Yeah,
again, for week 2 of the first time that you've ever actively invested in anything, that's pretty good.
yeah, pretty comfortable with it.
Excellent. So not concerned about the loss of second place.
Not too bad, and I guess technically I'm not that far behind it, really.
You really aren't.
Uh, yeah, but so
You're not.
I'm still comfortable.
Okay, that's good. Kyle, obviously outside of the GameStop pick, the rest of your portfolio looks quite good.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just making back the 10% that I invested in GameStop at this point. That's my goal this month, and I'm getting pretty close. I'm only 1% down overall, but yeah, Shopify had a really good last week. I mean, I guess the last couple of days it was going down, but in the middle of the week it had to jump so big that it didn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean they closed down on Friday, but that midweek was absolutely
Yes,
massive.
it was quite lucrative, I guess, for online
Was
retail.
that was that on the back of earnings or?
I think so. I think they
Okay.
reported that they made a lot of money over COVID, and I guess the investors were like, "Yeah, that sounds good to me," and keep doing that. So,
Yeah, I mean, in something that comes as a shock to absolutely nobody, an e-commerce company did really well when all of the physical stores close.
yep,
I know, right?
that's
Unbelievable.
yeah, that's a bit of a no-brainer, I guess. Workhorse went down, I think, this last week. So that pick is not. I mean, it's up overall, I guess, for the month still, but
Yeah.
overall for the last week it went down. So it's not too hot, but I guess it's not doing as awful as GameStop, so I don't have a ton to complain about. Additionally, like Tesla has not brought me much either overall. It's been just kind of like holding steady, going up and down over the
Yep.
past 2 weeks. I guess that was something I didn't really talk about last week. And TSMC had a good week, I think, overall this week.
They did. Well, I saw a report this week that was. I mean, I don't remember who published it first, but it circulated everywhere that we're short on chips, and car makers can't get enough chips, and computer people can't get enough chips. Nobody can get enough chips. So,
Hmm.
on the back of that type of monumental shortage, it's probably a good time to own at least one company that makes chips. So,
Yep. So I'm feeling pretty good about, yeah, like you said, I'm feeling pretty good about the rest of my portfolio overall.
yeah.
I mean, I guess like the workhorse pick isn't working out as well as I wanted it to, but it's also not really costing me anything, so I guess not too. I don't mind holding on to it. I guess after 2 weeks, we've like we made a statement about GameStop. I guess maybe I could sell at 83% loss. Again, I don't really know about that though. It's kind of like maybe I should just have some cost fallacy over it. I don't know.
Well, so in real life, this would be a great opportunity to talk about tax loss harvesting.
Well, yeah, so I guess I could report capital losses, I guess, to offset gains elsewhere for tax reasons, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of this money is fake, so it doesn't matter,
yeah,
but
yeah. So
in
I
real
mean,
life, that would be an option to explore.
even from a game standpoint, at this point, I can take, like whatever 17,000, whatever it is that's left in there, and invest it in something else. I guess if you go figure out something. I mean, if I put it in, say, like Bitcoin this last week, that would have been great.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my best performing investment.
Yeah, I guess you can. I don't know your transition to you talking about your picks and that how that one would go.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Bitcoin thing, like,
Yeah.
again, I'm not pretending to be like a Bitcoin evangelist by any stretch of the imagination, but I have been very surprised that it has been like not just that it has gone up the way that it has gone up, but in terms of what one usually expects from Bitcoin or any crypto on a broader scale, I don't feel like it's seen nearly as much volatility as I might have thought. Obviously, it's still very volatile. I mean, it swings all over the place on the know, drop of a hat, but compared to a lot of the giant swings we saw when it was a much younger investment. I mean, you're not seeing the Bitcoin was down 25% in a day type of, you're not seeing that type of movement anymore, which is good. But yeah, I mean, for the month, I'm up almost 48.5%.
On Bitcoin? Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean, how much did it go up on the day that Tesla announced that they had bought a bunch of it?
I don't remember the exact number, but it went up
That had to
quite
have
a lot.
been double digits, like
Yeah.
that single day.
Yeah. So they're up 40, 48 and some. Alaska Air is at 16.5. DraftKings, I didn't get the Super Bowl boost I was hoping for.
Really?
It's still up 11.5%, so I can't really complain that loudly. I was really hoping for kind of a to the moon moment for DraftKings on the wake of that game, but no dice. That's okay, though. I can't complain. It's still doing very, very well. So, the real question I have to figure out, though, is I'm only ahead of Austin by like 3 percentage points. And I don't really have plans to lose. So,
Looking to make moves.
well, remember that I'm sitting on that $4,000 from the beginning of the month that didn't get invested because there was some issue with fractional shares in one of the orders I put in. So I need to deploy that somewhere. The question is where. If I'm being honest, I'll probably just throw it at Bitcoin, and that will probably make the difference. But I'd like to put a little more thought into it first and at least see if there's anything else that piques my interest. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore what I've seen from that in the last couple weeks. And I mean, that's probably even understating it. In reality, it's been impossible to ignore. I look at it every day and I feel like, ooh, it's like Christmas. What happened today? Whether it goes up or whether it goes down, the whole evolution of tokens and the blockchain and all that stuff, as a store of value versus as a currency. I mean, there's just so much going on right now. It's a lot to keep track of, but I'm very curious to see how the folks pushing the envelope in that area, whether or not there's any significant disruption to the market as we know it because of that. Because I mean, now you're seeing like traditional Wall Street banks are starting to buy crypto. Like, okay, they all these years people have been saying, when is it mainstream? When is it mainstream? When is it mainstream? I mean, you could make the argument it's been mainstream for a long time now, but the fact that Wall Street banks are buying it now, I mean, what else do you need to see?
Yeah, like that's like foundationally like what we would call like like it's like the structure of it.
Yeah.
You have major financial institutions who are saying this is significant enough that we'll buy some.
Yeah.
I guess the next step of legitimacy would be like a government saying that we're going to hold some of our currency in crypto.
I saw something about that the other day. They're saying they don't want to regulate it until it hits a market cap of like 4 trillion or something like that. Which I think it's a couple years away from hitting a number quite that high. But I wouldn't be surprised if they changed their tune if things continue to go the way that they're going. So,
I guess Austin isn't here, but we talk about some of the changes he made, I guess, to get himself in the second place.
yeah, so let me pull up his portfolio and I'll walk you through some of those. I would love your feedback on them.
So I saw you bought Ripple, so that one in the last week was bonanzas.
Yeah, so he and I actually are going to have a conversation about this whole Ripple nonsense. Because the way that some of this is tracking, it's obviously percentage points. Ripple is so cheap that it's very easy for it to rack up multiple percentage point gains when it goes from like 44 cents to 65 cents.
Well, yeah,
So like,
it
how,
increased in 30, well, half its value
I understand that. But if
you threw $100,000 at that,
I don't think he did though. I think he threw like a couple random $1,000s at this thing, and now it's
oh, so you're saying like no matter the size of your initial investment, as long as it, see, is that how it's tracking? I thought it's tracking percentages, as in like returns on your like total and like.
it is. It is tracking that, and it is tracking the actual monetary amount that you're making. The problem, at least for me, is that when I check the leaderboard every morning when I get up and I see his percentages starting to crawl higher and higher and higher, I have to figure out why that's happening, and then I go in and check and see what he's doing, and I see that Ripple has a really great week, and I start to get kind of annoyed. Because, like, again, if you put enough money in it, yes, you're absolutely making real money off of this. Obviously, if we were playing with real money in the first place. You get my point. But, like, if you just randomly are like, for shits and giggles, I'm going to put $1,000 in here. Like, come on, man.
Amen.
Boo. Boo.
Maybe cover it in the rules.
Well, yeah. How are we tracking it? At the end, aren't we just gonna track what the total value of your portfolio is? So if he doesn't invest enough, that is how I thought we were tracking this. Like, what is the total value of your portfolio?
Well, perhaps that is a conversation.
Like percentage gains in specific investments to just say like which ones like actually end up being like the best bets. Like, regardless of however much you threw at it, like what actually just ended up being really good over the month. Like this one, I only threw $10,000 at it, whatever. Only $10,000 at it, but like it gained like 33% over. Wow, okay, cool. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like for punishment games and victory's sake, like should be how much. How much bank do you have, dude? That's all I care about.
How much money did you actually make? Yes.
If everyone had spent money and one person had spent nothing, and everyone had lost money that month, I'd be like, yeah, the guy who didn't do anything, he won. It's like, oh,
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong.
It's this is isn't that the point of fantasy investing? Like, it's who
Yeah.
makes the most money. So
Who can make the most money?
I understand. I guess why it would be frustrating to be like, oh, he's making fake big gains, but unless he's bold with it, I don't think it really matters. I guess you could discuss it with him. Since he's
Oh, I mean, I have no intention of changing the rules mid-competition. I mainly just want to give him a bad time. That's all.
I guess what else? I know Square also probably had a good week. I'm assuming.
Square had a fairly good week, and then the big thing, so he dumped Abbott Labs and he dumped Silver. So I, of course, had to give him a bad time about chasing Wall Street bets because the reason he bought Silver was he thought it was going to be the next Wall Street bets darling, and that did not happen. So.
Unlucky. I guess what they wanted next.
Yeah, they've gone kind of quiet. I'm kind of curious to see where things go from here.
The trust is brainstorming the next big.
Yes.
Yeah, what did they do? They did AMC for a bit, right? That was
AMC for a bit. I don't think that one was nearly as pronounced. Though AMC actually did quite well in that deal. They eliminated a whole bunch of debt through access to new capital because of all of the trading that came in. So.
liquid, people are throwing money.
Yep. Actual liquid assets, yes.
Yeah, they were like, we didn't have to get some millionaires to invest in us. You telling me there's a bunch of normal people just throwing money at us? Okay. Us, AMC.
Yep. Strange time to be alive, that is for sure. But so I guess my big question for you guys now that we're midway through, is there anything that you're looking at for the month of March that really, without giving too much away, obviously, are you looking at anything in particular that has piqued your interest? Is there anything new you want to try?
You know what? That's not something that I guess that I had planned far enough ahead for, but knowing my
Okay, so you bought that a little bit early.
Yeah, like maybe I could, like, knowing that, like, I probably could have just waited, invested in something either, I'm not, like, maybe more risky, considering most of my portfolio is all very, like, firm, safe kind of investments.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have done something a little more outside of my comfort zone, I guess. Yeah, I'm not. I honestly don't know what I'm going to do. In terms of, like, do I want to just hold? Like, that feels boring, though.
Well, and so that gets me to my question, right? The whole point of this is to make finance and investing as a topic more accessible for people to get into. It's obviously to promote the work that we're doing on ESG and impact stuff. It's like with those things in mind, do we want to keep the same rules and structure in place for the month of March, or do we want to try something different? Because I mean, you could do any number of things. You could limit it and say, okay, everybody has to put all million into one thing. You could do, grading solely on ESG related metrics. We could weed out a whole bunch of stuff that you couldn't pick from anymore. I know outside of silver, we haven't really done much with commodities, but that's something we could talk about doing. If you want to take it really, really to an extreme, you could do nothing but mutual funds and ETFs. I think there's a bunch of mutual funds and ETFs in there that we could talk about. It really depends on what you guys want to do, but I mean, there really is no limit to what we can do with this format. It's just a question of what you think is of value. I'm not gonna lie. At some point, I do want to try the put all million in one thing and see what happens. But I don't know if month number 2 is the month for that or not. But we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I feel like that's more of a, like, end towards finale type idea.
Perhaps.
Actually, can we go back to Austin's profile real quick?
Oh yes.
Point out that he bought Etsy.
Etsy? Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah, so he actually admitted, if you go back and watch last week's episode, he admitted that the sole reason he bought Etsy was because he saw it doing well for you and he wanted it. So
That makes me feel so happy that, like...
I mean, he endorsed the pick from the beginning. He liked Etsy, he liked Pinterest, he liked a lot of your picks from the beginning. So that's not terribly surprising to me to see him bandwagoning all over the place.
Austin's been a proponent of social media based, I feel like, investments.
Yes.
As long as I know. He was a big supporter of Snapchat, right? Like, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if he still owns shares in Snap or not, but if not, he had those for quite a while. If he obviously still has them, then I haven't checked on it recently. But yeah, he's big on social networking stocks, which that in and of itself could be a whole topic of, how are these companies monetizing things? How are they doing things differently? I know Facebook's been in the news with the whole iOS 14 thing, so I'm very curious to see next quarter what happens to Facebook, because we're at a very interesting point where a lot of these companies knew that part of their business model was dependent on free data from the end user. And now that free data from the end user is either A, not as easy to get, or B, not going to be free, depending on where you are and what we're talking about, how does that change the things that they do on a daily basis, and how does it change the revenue model? Because if customer data is not free anymore, I mean, that's... How many companies instantly are in serious trouble if they haven't been planning ahead of time for that? I mean, any search engine anywhere, the whole Facebook umbrella, a bunch of app companies, a bunch of ad networks. I mean, that in and of itself, if that ends up happening, there's going to be some serious market disruption there too. But yeah, I'm very curious next quarter with Facebook in particular. Now that the iOS 14 stuff is starting to actually, users are feeling the consequences of that, and businesses are too. I'm curious to see what happens. I don't think it's a bad thing that it's happening. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for user privacy. I think it's just difficult in this scenario to really separate fact from fiction, because I feel like both Apple and Facebook are doing a fair amount of posturing about why their side is right and why the other side is wrong. It almost feels like American politics.
Yeah, it's just gonna be very fluid. You're gonna have to see how everyone kind of handles everything, I guess.
Yeah. Gonna be interesting, that's for sure. Let's see what else. I had something else in here. I was looking at everybody's portfolios the other day.
Come on, Jordan, let's get the schedule going.
Oh, the schedule.
Yeah, you got your list up.
Your itinerary.
Oh no, I typically try not to plan these too much because I like that they feel very comfortable and natural in their path of conversation. Don't get me wrong, I do have some ideas for segments that we will be rolling out in future episodes the more that we kind of get this up and running. But we can talk about those another time. Oh yes, that was it. Airline stock. Kyle, I know you and I both have airline stock.
Doesn't Austin have something too?
No, he doesn't have any airline stock.
He has, like, I think he had Expedia or.
He has Expedia, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see travel. Okay.
Yeah.
Travel company.
So, Kyle, how much has Delta gone up in totality for you in the last 2 weeks?
12.75%.
Okay. So, Delta's doing really well. Alaska's doing really well. I'm curious to see if, obviously, COVID restrictions aren't really rolling back. They're not really moving forward. We're just kind of stuck right now. But that type of movement in the last 2 weeks alone would suggest to me that there's some serious momentum in travel and hospitality again. So I'm curious from your perspective. I don't know if you've seen anything pop up in the news or anything like that, but from your perspective, I'm sure you hear my dog behind me destroying boxes and making terrible amounts of noise. What is it like, again, you being a beginning investor? You pick something, it hasn't gone to the moon, but it's done extremely well. What has that been like, and do you think that have we made it to a point where travel and hospitality have become more viable buying opportunities?
So I did, going into this, before buying Delta, I was like, I really can't see where, I guess, COVID is going,
Yeah, I mean, nobody can. That's why it's such a problem.
Yeah, so very, unpredictable, everything.
Yeah.
So very fluid with it. But yeah, I guess it's, the return is really honestly surprising. And I'm not entirely sure what's kind of driving the travel to really, is it people that are going, people are just unfortunately caring less, I'm not sure what.
Well, no, and I mean, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that's a very fair question. That was something that I was looking at this week too. It was like, okay, it's doing well. Why is it doing well? And I don't want to say should it be doing well, because I don't feel like that's a fair way to word the question.
Yeah.
But you get the idea, right?
It's just trying to I guess read the reasons why. I don't know that I'm
soon or been scheduled to get one. So that's,
Yeah.
I guess maybe just encouraging people with the thought that, like, we can potentially travel soon, I guess. It'll be interesting to see, I guess, if there's like a large spike in cases, despite the fact that a vaccine is
Yeah.
like available to be distributed. Like, do they decide to roll out more regulations? Like, I don't know. Like, that would also be hard. At this point, it'd be hard for a lot of like, they've been taking a lot of flack for it for a long time at this point. It's hard to roll out more. I mean, even if you think it's necessary, and I may agree, but like, so it's hard. It's hard. You're gonna take a lot more flack for it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think you make a great point.
Some of them won't want to do it. Oh, yeah, keep going.
No, you make a great point. Like, I think a lot of why it could be doing as well as it is a lot of that. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, consumer optimism, right? I mean, I did see, on the topic of Delta, I did see they announced they were going to continue to block off middle seats for a while. So, you do have things like that in place. You have a lot of airlines that are in the process of getting app-based solutions for how are we tracking who has gotten vaccinated and who has not. So I think on that front, I think there's a lot of room for optimism, and I would sincerely hope that that's one of the big reasons that some of these stocks have rallied the way that they have. But yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think we're out of the woods yet. I mean, just because people start getting vaccines doesn't mean that you can pretend that none of this is happening. Because if that happens, then everything, we're back to square one. All of your hospitality and entertainment stock is back down the toilet. Lots of people are sick. Everybody's stuck at home again. Obviously, in that context, the performance of a stock is the furthest thing from anybody's highest priority. But you get the idea, right? There's a very real risk to consumer behavior and people making modifications to their behavior based on what they think is happening, when in fact it may be too soon to do those things.
Right. And I guess, so, kind of related to this, like, obviously COVID has been affecting, travel and
Yep.
very, like, international or, like, local travel, right? Like, regardless. But I guess I'm not educated enough in, like, the history. Like, I'm not a big traveler type of person either, but, like, is this, like, looking at the charts, like, I guess it seems like in the past 5 years, kind of stuff, like, the price rises and, like, ebbs and flows, like, around this time too. So I guess maybe we're kind of writing, like, history, like, this is a typical time for people to travel potentially, but also, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, things maybe, like we said, the
Yeah.
optimism about, like, vaccinations and people becoming more comfortable, or, yeah, like, people just kind of going about their things.
Yeah, I think when we talk about historical performance of airline stock, one thing that you absolutely have to keep in mind is the price of oil. And so, again, going back to commodities, right? Commodities and futures on the price of oil have historically absolutely been a big part of airlines' ability to be profitable or not be profitable. And, what are those margins? Because of how resource intensive they are. And so I'm curious, from an ESG perspective, like, as airlines start to look at mitigating those things, and eventually as we get to a point where we start to consider alternative sources of fuel, I honestly think airlines will be among the last to move because airplanes are extremely heavy and they have to fly extremely long distances. But when we get to that point, and whatever that solution ends up being, what does that do to the revenue generating potential of the airline industry? You would think that it would improve it, because whatever it is that they're probably going to replace it with will likely be less volatile than oil. But, I mean, at this point, that's nothing but conjecture. But I think it's a point that we definitely should be paying attention to, because that's going to be a very, very interesting long-term development, particularly on the ESG front. Lots of things to keep track of, that is for sure. Alrighty. Airline stuff was really the last interesting thing that I noticed this week in particular. Closing thoughts from everybody before we wrap up and move into week 3. Yeah, don't all go at once, jeez.
Yeah. I guess I probably have to look into something to invest in. I guess I'll probably try to find something that you guys are interested in. But I guess since there's a lot of ground to make up, I might as well start looking into things that are more risky or speculative, I guess, that have a higher chance of paying off. I don't know. Or if I should just try to focus on finishing out, just making any sort of gains for the month, I guess, just to have a positive year. Well, because that's, I guess I gotta think about that, right? Like, this month is gonna count for the year, but next month will also reset, so I gotta figure out, like, do I just try to, cut losses for the year total, or do I try to set myself up for next month or something?
How do you manage the game within the game? Yes. Yep.
But knowing that I just have the next 2 weeks, and then maybe we potentially reset. I don't know what to do. I'm now getting whispers in my ear oh, you should try to do something.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the boring person, but at the same time, this is even being a boring person, my returns are pretty good, so it's
yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of research actually that has gone into this topic of is managing your money in a method that feels boring or looks boring, or in fact is quite boring. It is that bad, and the answer is a resounding no.
No, right?
I mean, if you look at
safe investments, you invest in the market essentially, the big
Yep.
indexes, and you just don't touch your money. Over time, you'll see a comparable return to any confident, well-respected day trader at a big firm, because they get it wrong as often as they get it right. That's what makes them quote unquote good.
Yeah, I mean, the psychology behind all of this is a fascinating topic, and I would love to cover that more in depth as we continue to film these. Because you're right. I mean, passive investing, the data overwhelmingly supports passive investment strategy. The only problem that I have with the literature on that, and again, this is my perspective and the types of things that I'm looking for as an investor. If passively investing in the market generates the best return, but passively investing in the market is also the reason that my money could continue to perpetuate problems that I actively am seeking to get rid of, is passive investing really going to do that for me? And so I think that's where we start to run into a lot of interesting questions and a lot of interesting scenarios where, yes, the data says passive investing is the better long-term play, and that's inarguable at this point. But how do we blend those things together with some of the more active management techniques, with some of the more shareholder involvement, oriented, groups and strategies to really try to get the best of both? So that's always where I come at it from. But yeah, don't ever be concerned about the fact that your strategy is boring, because that's how you should be doing it. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. That is going to wrap it up for us this week. We will be back again next week as we hurtle towards the end of February. Beer money is on the line. Very, very high stakes indeed. Looking forward to seeing how all of this shakes out. Great catching up with you guys, and we'll talk to you again soon. So how was the week?
It was good. So I got bumped from third to second place.
We were talking about that yesterday. Yeah.
The big contribution is dumping silver and buying Ripple. So
Yeah.
just that week and a half time, I've got over a 42% return.
So let's talk about that, because I was actually complaining about that to the guys yesterday. I find it annoying as the person who's in the lead that when I check this every morning when I get up, I see the gap is closing, and then when I look and see why the gap is closing, I see it's something that's worth 50 cents a piece that just happens to be moving at a high rate of speed. How much money are you really making off of that position in your portfolio?
I put in 100,000.
Okay.
I've made about what is that, 41,000?
Yeah, about 41. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at that and I was like, man, I understand movement is movement, regardless of price. Movement is movement. But I was like, how much is he really making off of this? Because the gap is closing. But yeah, Kyle was also very flattered. He wanted me to tell you he was very flattered that you picked up ETSY because you liked his pick so much. So
Yeah. Well, it's been good. I mean, in that week and a half time, I've had over a 7% return.
yeah,
Really good. And then going off the discussion from last week, I mean, Square and Expedia are still doing well. They're maintaining.
yeah,
Amazon, about even. Same with Microsoft, only under 4% return in 2 weeks.
yeah.
And then T-Mobile, I'm down overall, just over 2%. So,
Okay.
most of them are half are stagnated, and then half are doing either well or extremely well.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of things, because some of these very same things came up yesterday. The first being airline and travel stock. So you obviously have Expedia, I have Alaska, Kyle has Delta. Our general reasoning about some of this yesterday, aside from actually tracking the news, is that the reason some of those depreciated assets have started to perform is that there's enough consumer confidence regarding the vaccine and some of the protocols that have been put in place that you're not necessarily buying, or the price is not reflective of the value today per se. It's reflective of the value of any of those assets in a world where travel and hospitality start to wake up again. Is that kind of your general feeling about it too?
Yeah, I mean, can't say the cash flow has really rebounded in those industries, but I agree there's a lot of consumer confidence that they're going to start picking up pace again and get moving.
Okay. So you're on the same page as us there. You're buying the confidence in the future return. You're not buying that they've made enough progress quite yet.
That's right. And also, I know a lot of still, just off headlines I read and things like that, I know that still, a lot of airlines have to shut down routes or
Yep.
are doing route frequently, but the routes that are still open, some of them seem to be very, very packed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting because you've cut back routes, so that gives and that takes, right, in terms of potential to generate revenue, but you also have dead costs associated with those things. But then the fact that you still have routes that are relatively full, if people are blocking off middle seats or whatever, it's just a weird place to try to assess how well something is going. You get a lot of mixed signals.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can agree that just about everything is most things are extremely overvalued right now. And a lot of it, I believe, is just confidence that things are going back to normal. But when they do go back to normal and the numbers don't really match their valuations, I think there's going to be at least a pullback. You know, not going to say like a crash or recession, but a significant pullback.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're due for a correction at some point, if I'm being honest. You know, you and I have talked about this since this whole thing started. Like, the market did a lot better than it probably should have in this span of time because consumers essentially willed it to. Investors willed that it would survive one way or another. And in doing so, yes, they've protected themselves from a lot of potentially undesirable outcomes. But you're going to have to confront those at some point because when things do go relatively back to normal, and like you're saying, oh gee, we had a great quarter, but the numbers don't match up because we've overinflated ourselves in the last 14 months. Like, you're going to have to reckon with that at some point. You can't just wish it away.
Right, I agree.
So,
but yeah, honestly, if you're paying, I think if you're paying attention and you're, you know, and you can within the first, you know, I don't know how long this correction will be. It could be a month-long correction, quarter-long correction, whatever. But if you're paying attention, you can see that it's starting to happen, and you can take action. It's a really good opportunity to rebuy things or put in more money at least.
Yep.
And kind of rebalance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a big proponent of, you know, if you can rebalance, if there's dollar cost averaging that you need to do. I mean, pay attention to corrections. Don't just say, oh, I'm not going to look at it and everything will be okay. Like, you have to be okay with watching your investments lose money because in the process of doing that, it means you're paying enough attention to see the opportunity in that moment too. So, yeah, I agree. I think that eventually we're going to have to reckon with this. It's not going to be good when it happens, but it's part of the market. But yeah, if you're watching, pay attention. There's opportunity there too. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was, and you referenced this when you were checking your portfolio right off the bat, some of the blue chips that most of us are holding have been kind of plodding along. I don't want to say that they're doing poorly, per se. Rather that they're just a little bit below expectations, perhaps. Why do you think that is?
Well, do we know, I haven't checked, but do we know if like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft have reported their quarter one earnings?
I believe most of them reported last week. Let me look.
Well, it could be a result of, earnings were just kind of what were expected and nothing too exciting, so they're just continuing, like, you know, these blue chip stocks, historically, you don't have a lot of movement in a short period of time.
Yeah, so Apple reported on the 27th.
Okay.
I should know these things, but I haven't had my coffee yet, so.
Yeah, my assumption is it's just a result of, their earnings are kind of what was expected and they're not really doing nothing too exciting came out of those earnings, creating a significant movement. They're just kind of doing their steady upward trend.
Yeah, pretty much everybody reported at the end of January.
Right, okay. Yeah, quarter four earnings, my bad, not quarter one. But,
yeah, I knew what you meant.
Yeah, so I guess the only big thing in my portfolio that I'm going to be watching is T-Mobile. I'm only down 2%, but if it keeps going downwards, I'm open to dumping it and buying something a little bit more aggressive. I'll stay away from cryptocurrency. I'll do an aggressive stock, but I'm gonna keep watching it. I'm still unsure.
Do you see all those beautiful green arrows?
But we'll see what happens with Tesla.
I don't mean to brag, but everything is net positive at this point. If you would have asked me on Thursday, that would have been a lie because Tesla did go down on Thursday. But
The gap is catching up fast.
yeah, I mean, it's closing. Even you and Kyle, I mean, today there's probably less than a percentage point between the two of you.
Yeah, it's about 0.5%.
So, yeah, getting down to the wire. So, you're looking at T-Mobile. You're thinking about dumping that for something more aggressive here in the final 2 weeks. Anything else that's on your radar?
I haven't picked out anything specific yet.
Okay.
I'm just going to kind of watch the news the next couple of days and see if we'll see what's in the news, because this is going to be a strategic short-term play. So
Yep.
I'm going to see what's in the news and just ride the wave.
Yep. So that brings up kind of the last big point that we talked about yesterday was, as we look ahead to March, are there any trends or anything that you are tracking there? And what do we do? Like, do you all want to keep rolling with the portfolios that you've built for another month? Do you want to put specific parameters or limitations in place and reset the challenge, on the first? I brought up the idea at one point of everybody gets to pick one thing and you have to put all of your $1 million into one thing just to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm open to mixing up a little bit. I don't have anything on my mind, specifically on my mind right now. Yeah, I'm down to mix it up and get creative.
Okay. The other option is we roll with it through the end of Q1 and then we start getting wild over the summertime. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Food for thought, lots of options. Like I mentioned with the guys yesterday, it's really about, how do we continue to make sure that topics regarding finance and investing are accessible and entertaining enough that people actually feel comfortable engaging with what's typically an intimidating and complicated thing. So,
right.
As long as we're doing that, that's what matters.
I think the last I read, which the government is talking about sending out more stimulus.
Correct.
I heard that those talks are postponed until April or so, or it won't be finalized until April, I guess. So I think in March, it's going to be a lot of build-up around those conversations, especially towards the end of March, assuming that they stay on their predetermined schedule of doing these things in April.
Yeah, assuming that it doesn't get set back again or moved up, or there's so many political games going on with that stuff. It's hard to pin down when any of that's really going to happen.
Right.
I don't know how you keep track of it all the time. It's like I could scroll through a news app and read 6 different headlines about the same thing that all say something different.
Yeah, one media outlet would say it's raining, and the other will say it's dry. So.
I guess it's all interpretation when it comes to whether or not policy is being acted on, but
Right.
Doesn't make it any less disorienting for the average person to try to keep track of. That's for sure.
Yeah. So it happens when it happens, I guess.
Yep. But definitely the news to watch for the month, though. I think you're absolutely right about that. Awesome. Let me just.
There's not anything new on my end that I'm planning to do. Just with T-Mobile, and I'll do some brainstorming to mix things up in the next quarter, next month, whatever we decide. Yeah. What about you? Any exciting things that you're going to make changes to?
No, I am probably going to allocate the last $4,000 that I have just sitting around because you all are starting to get a little close, and I would like to open up that gap a little bit more than 4%. So,
right.
See how far I can stretch it, but I don't know where I'm going to put it yet. So, I'm like you. Do I find some type of strategic and aggressive short-term play, or do I just put it into something that I already have that's doing fairly well, but then at that point I'm buying it at a heightened value than when I bought it at the beginning of the month, and so there's some downside risk there if performance starts to fall off, and gotta weigh some things before I decide anything.
Well, I'll keep a close watch. I check every night and every morning. So
yeah, I check it every day. It's become a really bad habit, but it's wildly entertaining to check in throughout the day and see what's going on with everybody. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, It's always good catching up. Look forward to seeing what you've got going on in the next couple weeks, and we'll talk to you again soon.